Good morning. It is always a joy whenever we come to the house of the Lord. Always count it a blessing to be here for fellowship. Today, we would want to join reflecting on the theme Bloom Where You Are Planted. Maybe you want to take a moment to share on what comes to mind when we hear this idea of blooming. If anyone would want to share, what comes to mind when you hear this idea, bloom? Flowers, anything else? Maybe spring is here. Someone said something? Oh, new growth. Yes. Sunshine. Yes, thank you. So we are prone to ask, what is it to bloom where you are planted? So we look at the scripture that we read this morning, John chapter 20. And more so, we want to understand why John was writing. The two major purposes why John wrote to believers was mainly to dispel some heresy that was going on, wrong teaching, distorted teaching. Number two, it was meant to ground Jesus' followers, rooting them in the gospel or the message of Jesus Christ, such that they could live out the teaching of Jesus Christ. That's why we see the book of John is rich action, a lot of action in the book of John. And as well, we see John emphasizes believing in Jesus. 62 times, John repeats this concept, believe. 62 times, John repeats this idea, believing. So when we look at flowers, for example, when we see flowers and when we see them at a state where the buds are opening up, I think that's the beauty, the maximum point of beauty when we see those buds opening up. That's the period of the greatest beauty. And we see the beauty that was hidden inside coming out, such that it becomes visible. And this is what John intended, to make sure that the message of Jesus Christ that had been deposited among the disciples would come out. And that's why John says, they will know you, not only by the words that you say, but they will know you by the action, the love that you share among yourself. And that's why Christians were nicknamed. We got this name not as, we didn't name ourselves Christians, but observers, onlookers said, look at that community of believers. Look at how they lead their lives. They live like that guy who used to live among us, Jesus Christ. Look at them. Look at the way they relate. Look at the way they share. Look at the way they reach out to one another. They are Christians. So in other words, it became a nickname. It was a nickname. They are trying to live like him. We see them living like him. And that's what John intends, to make sure that we are grounded. We embrace this idea that all we intend to do is to live out. Therefore, in other words, to bloom where the buds open up. And we see, this is what was inside as these buds were on there. This is now what was hidden. Now is for us to enjoy. We enjoy the beauty. So in other words, when we plant our flowers and when they open up, the buds open up, oftentimes we step out and we sit outside, watch those flowers, enjoy the beauty. So in other words, the flowers are meant to beautify our environments. Hence, John is reminding us that our purpose, each and every one of us, we have a purpose. And the purpose is for us to beautify our environments, beautify our families, beautify our communities, by living out or emitting the love of God. At times, by the words that we speak, living out the teaching of Jesus by the actions that follow our words. That's why I love the saying, one individual said this prayer: let those who know thee not know thee, because they know thee who know thee. In other words, then, if that is what John intended, we ask ourselves, what makes us give up the blooming? Oftentimes, when a flower is ready to bloom and we see it not blooming, we look at the flower and say, what is it? What is stopping this flower from blooming? The buds are on there. Why is this flower not blooming? So we look at the environment. Maybe there's something wrong in the soil. Maybe there's something, maybe there's a worm. Maybe there's something that is affecting this plant. Therefore, we attend to whatever might be interfering with the growth of this flower, hindering it from opening up, the buds opening up. The same applies to us as individuals. John is reminding us, when we are not opening up and emitting the love of God, then we look at the environment. What is in the environment that is preventing us from emitting the love of God? What is in the environment that is hindering us from living out the message of Jesus Christ? Oftentimes in our environments, there is heightened insecurity. I remember very well, 9/11, I was in Washington, D.C., when there was heightened insecurity in our nation. It was challenging. The environment wasn't conducive for people to reach out to one another. That insecurity robbed us love for one another. People were ready to step into their car. The moment they went to the grocery store, they rushed into the grocery store, picked up their stuff, ran back into their car. There was no time to look around. Why? Because there was heightened insecurity. So oftentimes, when there is heightened insecurity, it takes away. That kind of environment robs us the good that is in us. Which means John understands that there is a positive in every human being. There is something positive that is ready to burst out, that is ready to open up. But there is need for the environment to be favorable, to be conducive. That's why I gave an example of 9/11. And that's why John suggests that the thief comes to steal and destroy, robbing people of what is intended. The things that are positive that have been deposited in them, they are stolen away from them. I know most of you, if you have seen babies, when you reach out to babies, I've never seen a baby when they are born, they are busy harming other people. But all the time when you reach to a baby, they are just giggling, they are opening their, even before they have those teeth, they just giggle and they smile, and you can see they are ready to emit that joy, to emit that love. Whoever comes into the room, they are busy. Which means from the point we were created, we are all about doing something positive. We see it as we see kids in the room. But at the same time, when you look at the environments, you see some people increasing in the negative stuff. Why? At times it's because of the environment they find themselves in. They are prone to develop something that is not positive, because some at times in heightened insecurity. That's why we find the disciples locked in a room. There was heightened insecurity. They were in that room because they were fearing for their lives. The disciples who used to go around touching people, healing people, feeding the 5,000 people who were hungry. Jesus said, tell them to sit. We are ready to feed them. Let's feed them. They cannot go back home hungry. They cannot go back home desperate. We need to reach out to them because we are here. Let's touch them in a positive way. And the people who left Jesus that day, they were joyful, they were happy. And these are the very same disciples who are now locked in a room. Why? Because there was a heightened insecurity. There's a drastic change of circumstance. The situation just changed for them. Hence, they wondered, who are we? Who are we meant to be? Why? Because their purpose was so connected to Jesus when they were walking with him. Hence, when he was no longer there, they were failing to understand who they were meant to be. Hence, there's some common reaction when there is that environment that is in heightened insecurity, drastic change of circumstance. Some of the common reaction is that some people end up exhibiting anger. They're full of wrath. When there's insecurity, oftentimes there's negativity. People become so negative. And you say, this individual is so positive. What happened? And you see them, they're just negative. Nothing comes out of them that is positive. Why? Maybe there's some negative experience. Maybe some diagnosis of some kind. They receive some sad news. Hence, at times they give up the good that they used to do. They just resign. It's no longer there. They are no longer ready to reach out like they used to do. They are no longer ready to call their friends like they used to. At times, some people yield to fear. Phobos in Greek. Phobos in Greek suggests that people withdraw. They are no longer at the expected position. That's why the disciples were in the room. It was not a retreat, because a retreat is meant for people to go back and continue. It's a point of re-strategizing when people retreat. But the disciples were not on a retreat, but it was a withdrawal for boss. They had withdrawn, which means they were no longer at that strategic position. They felt they no longer had the resources. They were not tooled to face the challenges of the day. In other words, the disciples, for boss, suggest that they felt inadequate to the task of the day. They felt they lacked the resources. Hence, they yielded to this for boss. Fear. Oftentimes, the common reaction is hopelessness, where people just sit. They're hopeless. They can no longer reach out to other people and say, hope, there's a better tomorrow. Move on, there is a better tomorrow. It's now, I don't know what lies ahead. But today, we are reminded. We are reminded of Jesus who stepped into the room, visited the disciples in the room, and assured them. He pronounced peace at that visit. I have good news, my friends. We believe in a Jesus Christ who steps in the room. He didn't step into the room to say, guys, didn't I tell you I was going to rise after 3 days? He didn't reach out into the room to say, well, you guys, you have been in this room maybe for a while, for a number of days. He didn't say there is a stink smell in this room. Why you guys are in this room? It's so filthy in this room. But he reached out to them with compassion, sat with them, interacted with them, not to point at their shortfalls, but to identify with them and say, I understand. I feel for you. He was there to empathize with them and say, folks, I know what you are going through. Jesus never steps into the room to point at our shortfalls. That's why in the book of John chapter 3, verse 16, John says, according to Jesus, he suggests that he didn't come to point at our shortfalls. For God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten Son, that whosoever believed in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. Which means Jesus' purpose and objective when he steps into the room is to say, come on, guys. I hear your stories. I know how you feel. I know where your mind went when this diagnosis was revealed to you. I know when you heard the sad news about your son, your daughter, your mother, your father, your grandmother, your grandfather. I know what came to your mind. But I'm here. I've stepped into the room to identify with you. This is a Christ who walks into the room. In our rooms, the rooms of our lives, the walls that surround us, oftentimes the walls that intend to collapse on us, Jesus steps into that room and he says, yea, I am here with you. Hopelessness suggests that you are all alone. Yet Jesus steps into the room to remind us, you are never alone. That's why in Matthew chapter 28, verse 20, Jesus said, Lo, I will be with you always, wherever you go. Not only to remind us of the areas that we need to grow, but to identify with us when we encounter some painful experiences, when we are in agony. Why? Because Jesus understood this. Even when he was on the cross, he made that deep cry, Abba, Abba, the deep cry, where he felt lonely, where he was hungering for the intervention of God. But yet he yielded to the will of God. Why? To redeem us, so that he would step in the room and assure us when we are discouraged. So he is here today. The question is, are you open and willing for him to guide us and lead us? Are you willing to trust in him? Are you willing to experience this compassionate Christ? John reminds us, he was speaking to people who were dealing with the philosophy, the Greek philosophy, that taught people that you can become better through reasoning. When you reason out, you get to that point, you are a better individual. But John was reminding through the gospel of Jesus Christ, we are redeemed. We become better when we experience Christ, when we interact with Christ, when we allow him and trust him to touch us and transform us. He didn't dispute the goodness of reasoning, but he was saying reasoning alone will not transform you. Reasoning alone will not liberate you. Reasoning alone will not take you to that point where you say, indeed, my sins are no more. Hence, he pronounced peace. He pronounced joy. So today, Jesus is here to empower us, such that we may let go. Let go of the things that hinder us from experiencing the peace of Christ. But we can only allow this Christ to touch us when we comprehend the depth of Christ's love. That Christ's love for us is so deep. And today, I want to share with you a story shared to me by a friend of mine. He said, long back ago in this country, there's a young boy who used to carve, made beautiful stuff. But one night, some robbers came to their home, broke in, then took that beautiful carve, went away with it. To cut the long story short, one day this young boy stumbled into a store, and there was his carve, right in that store. Looked at that said to the storekeeper, "Storekeeper, that beautiful calf in your store belongs to me." And the storekeeper said, "I'm sorry, young boy. If you want this, you have to pay for it." The young boy said, "But that's mine." And he said, "Well, but this guy brought it to me and I bought it. So you have to pay." The young boy went back to parents, convinced them that he wanted to get some money to buy the calf back. Managed to raise the money, went back to the store, and he said to the storekeeper, "I'm back. I want that calf." The storekeeper said, "Little boy, I told you, you have to pay for this." He said, "Yes, today I've come with the price. I'm ready to pay." Then he paid the price. On his way out, the little boy held the calf, held it close to his heart. He said, "You are mine. From the day I met you, you are mine. Today I came in this store, I bought you. You are mine. You are mine because I met you. You are mine because I bought you." Today, Jesus is here to remind us. From the day of creation, you were his. And on the cross, he bought you. He bought me. John's gospel points to the love of God. That the love of God is so deep. The love of God is so huge. It's so humongous that we cannot comprehend it. But we can try and believe and trust to understand the depth of this love. When this love captures us, it melts our hearts to remember that there is a price tag. Jesus paid the price on the cross. Why? Because according to John, we were stolen. We were stolen. That's the message that is in John, in the Gospel of John. We were stolen. There are good things that were in us that were stolen one by one, one by one, one by one. They were stolen at the times, during challenging times when our environments were not healthy. Those things that were good in us were stolen. But Jesus is coming to us to say, "I've come to reinstate you. I've come to reinstate you." If we understand the depth of this love, we can receive and allow Jesus' healing to dwell inside us. We can allow the breath of Jesus' power of the Holy Spirit to touch us and to melt our hearts, such that we can understand Moltmann and join Moltmann, my favorite theologian, as he suggests. But for the Christian faith, true freedom is found neither in insight into cosmic necessity or a necessity of world history, nor in the autonomous right of disposal over oneself and one's property. It means being possessed by the divine energy of life, participation in that energy through trust in the God of the Exodus and the resurrection. The believer experiences and partakes of this liberating power of God, which raises to new life. So we are raised to new life by this liberating power of the love of Christ. When this love of Christ touches us, it liberates us. It sets us free from all entanglement. Hence, we are empowered to let go. We let go the stuff, the negative stuff. We let go the anger. We let it go. We let it go. We let go the discouragement. Why? Because according to John chapter 20, 18, 25 and 28, it captures the underlying Christian community primary energizer. What energizes us as a Christian community? I have seen the risen Lord. This is what energized Mary. And she reached out to the disciples. Then the disciples, when Jesus stepped in the room and they interacted with the risen Lord, they were energized. They reached out to Thomas. And Thomas, when these disciples reached out, he was now searching for answers. And when Jesus stepped in the room and interacted with Thomas, Thomas was energized. We are energized when we realize and recognize that we trust and believe in the risen Lord He is risen, and He is here with us. And as such, we come to grasp with this idea that there is a communal purpose captured in verse 21, which suggests that as a community of believers, our purpose is to bloom wherever we are planted. How do we bloom? Because we are ready to go out and bloom wherever we are planted. How do we bloom wherever we are planted? We are ready to emit that love of God by our words, by our action. That's why this woman decided to go to Calcutta, to stay with the depressed, to stay with the downtrodden, and he sat with them. That's why this guy in Kagawa went into Japan. Mother Teresa in India, Calcutta. Kagawa in Japan reached out to people who are in slums and sat with them, ate with them. Why? Because it was this idea, the understanding that indeed the risen Lord is with us and He has redeemed us indeed. And He was ready to emit the love of God in their own way. They were ready to emit the love of God. You and me, in our own way, we are sent by God. As John suggests, we will create a community that is rooted in this idea of emitting the love of God. That's why John reminds us that when we go out, our purpose is to emit this love such that people will experience forgiveness. It's not the literal meaning where he's saying we have the power to forgive people and to decide whom we won't forgive. But John is reminding us that when we embrace the Redeemer, when we embrace the risen Lord, when we emit that love, people will say, I want to live like Him. They will want to find out, why are you so loving? Why do you say so positive, some positive words? Why do you emit that kind of love? Then they are ready to embrace this love of God. Hence, they experience that love as well. So our purpose is to go out and emit love, so that the people who interact with the same Redeemer whom we have interacted with. In the same way that Mary reached out to the disciples reached out to Thomas, and it is spread like fire. The community of believers is not about the crusades. That was a distorted teaching. The rooted message of Jesus Christ is we'll go out and live our lives in a way that people will stop. Our family members will stop and say, Auntie, what's going on? Uncle, what's going on? Grandpa, what's going on? Son, daughter, what's going on? Neighbor, what's going on? Friend, what's going on? There's too much love that you are emitting. Where do you get this from? Then we point, because He is risen, because He is alive, because He has redeemed me, because He has loved me when I didn't deserve His love. He is risen. That's why I'm emitting this love. Then they say, I want you, Jesus. I want you, Jesus, because He has transformed you. He has redeemed you. He has empowered you. Therefore, as a community, we started to let it go because we are so empowered. We are so empowered to love. Amen.